Part 3. Let us see what had happened. The hour after midnight was striking when Monsieur Madeleine had left the hall of the Arras Assize. He had returned to his inn just in time to take the mail coach, in which he had retained his seat. A little before 6 in the morning he had reached Montreuil-sur-Mer, where his first care had been to post a letter to Monsieur Laffitte, then to go to the infirmary and visit Fantine. Immediately upon the discharge of Champmathieu, the prosecuting attorney closeted himself with the judge. The subject of their conference was on the necessity of the arrest of the person of Monsieur le Maire of Montreuil-sur-Mer. The order of arrest was therefore granted. The prosecuting attorney sent it to Montreuil-sur-Mer by a courier at full speed to Police Inspector Javert. It will be remembered that Javert had returned to Montreuil-sur-Mer immediately after giving his testimony. Javert was just rising when the courier brought him the warrant and order of arrest. The courier was himself a policeman, and an intelligent man who in 3 words acquainted Javert with what had happened at Arras. The order of arrest, signed by the prosecuting attorney, was couched in these terms: Inspector Javert will seize the body of Monsieur Madeleine, Mayor of Montreuil-sur-Mer, who had this day been identified in court as the discharged convict Jean Valjean. Javert came unostentatiously, had taken a corporal and 4 soldiers from the station house nearby, had left the soldiers in the court, had been shown to Fantine's chamber by the portress without suspicion, accustomed as she was to see armed men asking for the mayor. On reaching the room of Fantine, Javert turned the key, pushed the door open with the gentleness of a sick nurse, or a police spy, and entered. Properly speaking, he did not enter. He remained standing in the half-opened door, his hat on his head, and his left hand in his overcoat, which was buttoned to the chin. In the bend of his elbow might be seen the leaden head of his enormous cane, which disappeared behind him. He remained thus for nearly a minute, unperceived. Suddenly, Fantine raised her eyes, saw him, and caused Monsieur Madeleine to turn around. At the moment when the glance of Madeleine encountered that of Javert, Javert, without stirring, without moving, without approaching, became terrible. No human feeling can ever be so appalling as joy. It was the face of a demon who had again found his victim. The certainty that he had caught Jean Valjean at last brought forth upon his countenance all that was in his soul. The deformity of triumph spread over his narrow forehead. It was the fullest development of horror that a gratified face can show. Javert was at this moment in heaven. Without clearly defining his own feelings, yet notwithstanding with a confused intuition of his necessity and his success, he, Javert, personified justice, light, and truth, in their celestial function as destroyers of evil. He was surrounded and supported by infinite depths of authority, reason, precedent, legal conscience, the vengeance of the law, all the stars in the firmament. He protected order. He hurled forth the thunder of the law. He avenged society. He lent aid to the absolute. He stood erect in a halo of glory. There was in his victory a reminder of the defiance and of combat, standing haughty, resplendent. He displayed in full glory the superhuman beastliness of ferocious archangel. The fearful shadow of the deed which he was accomplishing made him visible in his clenched fist the uncertain flashes of the social sword. Happy and indignant, he had set his heel on crime, vice, rebellion, perdition, and hell. He was radiant, exterminating, smiling. There was an incontestable grandeur in this monstrous St. Michael. Javert, though hideous, was not ignoble. Probity, sincerity, candour, conviction, the idea of duty are things which, mistaken, may become hideous, but which, even though hideous, remain great. Their majesty, peculiar to the human conscience, continues in all their horror. They are virtues with a single vice, error. The pitiless, sincere joy of a fanatic in an act of atrocity perseveres an indescribably mournful radiance which inspires us with veneration. Without suspecting it, Javert in his fear-aspiring happiness was pitiable, like every ignorant man who wins a triumph. Nothing could be more painful and terrible than this face, which revealed what we may call all the evil of good. Part 4. Fantine had not seen Javert since the day the mayor had wrested her from him. Her sick brain accounted for nothing, only she was sure that he had come for her. She could not endure this hideous face. She felt as if she were dying. She hid her face with both hands and shrieked in anguish, "Monsieur Madeleine, save me!" Jean Valjean, we shall call him by no other name henceforth, had risen. He said to Fantine in his gentlest and calmest tone, "Be composed. It is not for you that he comes." He turned to Javert and said, "I know what you want." Javert answered, "Hurry along." While speaking thus, he did not stir a step, but cast upon Jean Valjean a look like a noose, with which he was accustomed to draw the wretched to him by force. It was the same look which Fantine had felt penetrate to the very marrow of her bones 2 months before. At the exclamation of Javert, Fantine had opened her eyes again. But the mayor was there. What could she fear? Javert advanced to the middle of the chamber, exclaiming, "Hey there, are you coming?" The unhappy woman looked around her. There was no one but the nun and the mayor. To whom could this contemptuous familiarity be addressed? To herself alone. She shuddered. Then she saw a mysterious thing, so mysterious that its like had never appeared to her in the darkest delirium of fever. She saw the spy Javert seize Monsieur the Mayor by the collar. She saw Monsieur the Mayor bow his head. The world seemed vanishing before her sight. Javert in fact had taken Jean Valjean by the collar. Javert burst into a horrid laugh, displaying all his teeth. "There is no Monsieur the Mayor here any longer," said he. Jean Valjean did not attempt to disturb the hand which grasped the collar of his coat. He said, "Javert." Javert interrupted him. "Call me Monsieur the Inspector." "Monsieur," continued Jean Valjean, "I would like to speak a word with you in private." "Aloud, speak aloud," said Javert. "People speak aloud to me." Jean Valjean went on, lowering his voice. "It is a request that I have to make of you." "I tell you to speak aloud." "But this should not be heard by anyone but yourself." "What is that to me? I will not listen." Jean Valjean turned to him, and said rapidly and in a very low tone, "Give me 3 days. 3 days to go for the child of this unhappy woman. I will pay whatever is necessary. You shall accompany me, if you like."
"Are you laughing at me?" cried Javert. "Hey, I did not think you were so stupid. You ask for 3 days to get away and tell me you're going for this girl's child. Ha! Ha! That is good. That is good."
Fantine shivered. "My child?" she exclaimed. "Going for my child? Then she is not here? Sister, tell me, where is Cosette? I want my child. Monsieur Madeleine, Monsieur the Mayor." Javert stamped his foot.
"There is the other now. Hold your tongue, hussy. Miserable country, where galley slaves are magistrates, and women of the town are nursed like countesses. Ha! But all this will be changed. It was time."
He gazed steadily at Fantine, and added, grasping anew the cravat, shirt, and coat collar of Jean Valjean,
"I tell you there is no Monsieur Madeleine. There is no Monsieur the Mayor. There is a robber, there is a brigand, there is a convict called Jean Valjean, and I have got him. That is what there is."
Fantine started upright, supported herself by her rigid hands and arms. She looked at Jean Valjean, then at Javert, then at the nun. She opened her mouth as if to speak. A rattle came from her throat. Her teeth struck together. She stretched her arms in anguish, convulsively opening her hands, and groping about her like one who is drowning. She sank suddenly back upon the pillow. Her head struck the head of the bed and fell forward on her breast, the mouth gaping, the eyes open and glazed. She was dead. Jean Valjean put his hand on that of Javert, which held him, and opened it as if he would open the hand of a child. Then he said, "You have killed this woman."
"Have done with this!" cried Javert, furious. "I am not here to listen to sermons. Save all that, the guard is below. Come right along, or the handcuffs."
There stood in the corner of the room an old iron bedstead in a dilapidated condition, which the sisters used as a camp bed when they watched. Jean Valjean went to the bed, wrenched out the rickety head-bar, a thing easy for muscles like his, in the twinkling of an eye, and with the bar in his clenched fist, looked at Javert. Javert recoiled toward the door. Jean Valjean, his iron bar in hand, walked slowly toward the bed of Fantine. On reaching it, he turned and said to Javert, in a voice that could scarcely be heard, "I advise you not to disturb me now." Nothing is more certain than that Javert trembled. He had an idea of calling the guard, but Jean Valjean might profit by his absence to escape. He remained, therefore, grasped the bottom of his cane, and leaned against the framework of the door without taking his eyes from Jean Valjean. Jean Valjean rested his elbow upon the post, and his head upon his hand, and gazed at Fantine, stretched motionless before him. He remained thus, mute and absorbed, evidently lost to everything of this life. His countenance and attitude bespoke nothing but inexpressible pity. After a few moments' reverie, he bent down to Fantine, and addressed her in a whisper. What did he say? What could this condemned man say to this dead woman? What were these words? They were heard by none on earth. Did the dead woman hear them? There are touching illusions, which perhaps are sublime realities. One thing is beyond doubt. The sister, the only witness of what passed, has often related that, at the moment when Jean Valjean whispered in the ear of Fantine, she distinctly saw in it an ineffable smile beam on those pale lips and in those dim eyes, full of the wonder of the tomb. Jean Valjean took Fantine's head in his hands and arranged it on the pillow, as a mother would have done for her child, then fastened the string of her nightdress and replaced her hair beneath her cap. This done, he closed her eyes. The face of Fantine, at this instant, seemed strangely illumined. Death is the entrance into the great light. Fantine's hand hung over the side of the bed. Jean Valjean knelt before this hand, raised it gently, and kissed it. Then he rose, and turning to Javert, said, "Now I am at your disposal." Fantine was buried in the common grave of the cemetery, which is for everybody and for all, and in which the poor are lost. Happily, God knows where to find the soul. Fantine was laid away in the darkness, with bodies which had no name. She suffered the promiscuity of dust. She was thrown into the public pit. Her tomb was like her bed.